My ex-wife left one voicemail 6 years after our divorce, and I've listened to it 32 times, but I still can't bring myself to delete it. 32 times I've pressed play in the dark of my truck, in the silence of a house that was supposed to be ours, listening to Nora Whitfield's voice say the last words she ever spoke to me. A woman I married, a woman I failed, a woman who walked out the door 6 years ago because I loved her, with one foot already halfway gone. I'm Caleb Mercer. I build homes for other families now, but I couldn't hold my own marriage together, because the day the divorce papers came, I told myself I was fine. I told myself 6 years would be enough to forget the sound of her laugh. But then, on a Tuesday afternoon in a hardware store that smelled of sawdust, my phone buzzed, and there it was. Her name on my screen after 2,190 days of silence. One voicemail, 19 seconds long. And what she said in those 19 seconds is the reason I can't delete it. The reason I've listened 32 times and counting. So why did the woman who left me finally call after 6 years? What made a grown man sit frozen in a parking lot, replaying 19 seconds until the sun went down? And what did Nora say that I still can't bring myself to erase? Let me take you back to that Tuesday. It was the kind of ordinary afternoon that changes nothing and everything. I was standing in aisle 7 of Harlan's Hardware, holding a box of 3-inch deck screws, doing what I do best, thinking about wood and nails instead of the ache in my chest. That's the thing about being a carpenter. You can build a whole world with your hands and never once have to look inside your own heart. I liked it that way. I'd built my whole life that way. The store smelled like sawdust and cut pine, and I breathed it in the way some men breathe in the ocean. It was the only thing that ever made me feel steady. My father used to smell like that when I was a boy, before everything fell apart. Sawdust and coffee and cigarette smoke. Funny, the things that stay with you. Then my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I almost didn't check it. I figured it was a client asking when I'd finished their kitchen, or a supplier telling me the oak was delayed again. But something made me pull it out. Maybe it was the way the store had gone quiet. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. The screen lit up with one word. What? Nora. And the box of deck screws slipped right out of my hand. They scattered across the floor, dozens of them, rolling under the shelves, catching the light, and I just stood there, frozen, staring at a name I hadn't seen light up my phone in 6 years. A name I'd never deleted, even though I'd told myself 100 times that I should. You don't keep the number of a woman who left you. Everybody knows that. But I'd kept hers, tucked away in my phone like a splinter I couldn't dig out. Missed call. Then, 3 seconds later, the little icon appeared. Voicemail. My heart was slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat. A grown man, 41 years old, 6 feet of muscle and calluses, and I was shaking like a kid caught doing something wrong. I looked around the store, like somebody might be watching, like somebody might know. But there was just an old man comparing paint samples 2 aisles down, and a teenage clerk restocking batteries, and me, alone with a name on a screen. I knelt down and started picking up the screws. I don't know why. I think I just needed to do something with my hands, something normal, something that made sense. My fingers wouldn't cooperate. I kept dropping them. And the whole time, that voicemail icon sat there on my screen, glowing, waiting, like a door I was too afraid to open. Because here's what you have to understand about Nora and me. When she left, she didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't call me names or slam doors or make a scene. That's not who she was. Nora was the kind of quiet that hurt worse than any shouting ever could. She just packed one suitcase, stood in the doorway of the house I built with my own 2 hands, and looked at me with those tired brown eyes. And she said, "Caleb, I can't keep loving someone who's always got 1 foot out the door." Then she was gone. No goodbye. No fight, no second chances. Just those words, hanging in the air of a house that suddenly felt like a coffin. And I let her go. That's the part I never told anyone. I let her walk out. I stood there in my own living room, and I didn't chase her, didn't beg, didn't say the one thing that might have made her stay. Because a part of me, a broken, frightened part of me, was relieved. Relieved that the thing I'd always been afraid of had finally happened. So I didn't have to be afraid of it anymore. You want to know why a man leaves one foot out the door of his own marriage? I'll tell you. When I was 9 years old, I watched my mother pack a suitcase too. I remember it like a photograph burned into my brain. She was crying, but quietly, trying not to wake me. I was supposed to be asleep, but I sat at the top of the stairs in my dinosaur pajamas, and I watched her fold her clothes into that brown suitcase, and I watched my father stand in the kitchen with his back to her, drinking, saying nothing, not one word. Two people who had promised each other forever, and neither of them fought for it. She left, he drank, and I grew up learning one lesson so deep it got into my bones. Love doesn't last, so don't hold on too tight, because the tighter you hold, the more it hurts when they let go. I carried that lesson into everything. Every girlfriend, every relationship. I kept a wall up. And then I met Nora Whitfield at a friend's barbecue when I was 32, and for the first time in my life, that wall started to crack. She was a veterinary nurse. She had grass stains on her jeans and a laugh that came from somewhere deep in her belly, loud and unashamed, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile. She wasn't like anybody I'd ever met. She loved things out loud, big and messy and without any fear. She'd cry at commercials. She'd talk to dogs like they were people. She rescued a 3-legged cat and named him Lucky, which I thought was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And she looked at me, quiet, walled off, careful me, and somehow she saw straight through all of it. She saw the little boy at the top of the stairs, and she loved him anyway. We got married 11 months later, under an oak tree in her mother's backyard. I built the arch we stood under with my own hands. I sanded every board until it was smooth as glass. I told myself, standing there in my one good suit, watching her walk toward me in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. I told myself, this time I'll hold on. This time I won't run. But you don't undo 20 years of fear with one wedding day. For a while, we were happy. God, we were happy. We bought a little fixer-upper on Maple Street, and every weekend I'd tear out walls and lay new floors, and Nora would paint the room's colors with ridiculous names like Morning Fog and Butter Yellow, and she'd sing while she did it, off-key and beautiful. We'd fall asleep on a mattress on the floor, because we hadn't finished the bedroom yet, covered in paint and sawdust, and I remember thinking, maybe I was wrong. Maybe love does last. But then the fear started creeping back in, slow, quiet, like water finding a crack. When Nora wanted to talk about the future, I'd change the subject. When she wanted to plan for kids, I'd say, let's just wait a little longer. When she'd reach for me in the dark and say, promise me forever, I'd hold her tight, and I'd say the words. But there was always that little voice in the back of my head whispering, don't believe it. Don't get too comfortable. Remember the suitcase. And Nora felt it. Of course she felt it. She was the kind of woman who felt everything. She could tell when I was holding back, when I was keeping a piece of myself locked away where she couldn't reach it. And it broke her heart a little more every single day. Why won't you let me all the way in? She asked me once. Near the end. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the one I'd built from reclaimed barnwood. Her eyes were shining. I've given you everything, Caleb. Everything. Why do you keep one part of yourself away from me? And I didn't have an answer. Or I did, but I was too scared to say it, because the truth was too ugly to speak out loud. The truth was, because if I give you all of me, and you leave, there'll be nothing left. And everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves. So I said nothing. I just looked down at my coffee, and I watched something die in her eyes. That was the beginning of the end. Not a big explosion. Just a slow fade, 1,000 small silences. 1,000 moments where I could have reached for her and didn't. 1,000 times she waited for me to fight for us, and I just stood there, at the top of the stairs, in my dinosaur pajamas, watching another suitcase get packed, until one gray morning in October, she packed hers for real. That was 6 years ago. And now, standing in aisle 7 of Harlan's Hardware with a fistful of deck screws and a phone that wouldn't stop glowing, all of it came rushing back like a river breaking through a dam. Every memory, every regret. Every night I'd lain awake in that same house. I never sold it, couldn't bring myself to, staring at the ceiling, Hearing her voice say, "I can't keep loving someone who's always got one foot out the door." I paid for my screws. I don't even remember doing it. I remember the clerk saying, "Have a good one, sir," and I remember nodding, and then I was outside in the parking lot, and the October sun was low and orange, and I was sitting in my truck with my hands on the steering wheel and my phone in my lap. One voicemail. 19 seconds. I stared at it for the longest time. My thumb hovered over the play button, and 100 questions screamed through my head all at once. Why was she calling? After 6 years? Was she okay? Was she hurt? Was she sick? Was she? And this thought made my stomach drop. Was she calling to tell me she was getting married again? Was that it? Had she found some other man? Some better man? A man who didn't keep one foot out the door. And she was calling to tell me she'd finally gotten her forever. Just not with me. I almost didn't play it. God help me. I almost just deleted it right there without listening, because some pain you'd rather not know than know. But my thumb had a mind of its own. I pressed play, and her voice filled the cab of my truck. Older, softer, a little unsure, like she'd rehearsed this and forgotten every word the moment I picked up. Except I hadn't picked up, had I? I'd been standing in aisle 7, dropping screws, too much of a coward to answer a phone. "Hey, it's me. It's Nora." A pause, a breath. In that breath I heard 6 years. I know this is out of nowhere. I know I have no right. But I was in a hardware store today, and it smelled like sawdust. And her voice cracked. "I just needed to hear your voice. Even if you don't call back. Especially if you don't. There's something I should have told you a long time ago, Caleb. Something about that last day. And I can't carry it by myself anymore." And then, so quiet I almost missed it. So quiet I've had to lean in every single one of the 32 times since. "Call me back. Please. Before it's too late." Click. 19 seconds. And I sat there in that parking lot as the sun went down, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, that last sentence echoing off the walls of my skull like a hammer on a nail. Something about that last day. Before it's too late. Too late for what? I didn't call her back that night. I know that probably sounds crazy. A man gets a voicemail from the only woman he's ever really loved. 6 years of silence broken in 19 seconds, and he just sits with it? But fear doesn't work on logic. Fear works on old wounds. And mine was the oldest wound I had. I drove home with the phone sitting in my cup holder like it was radioactive. The house on Maple Street came into view the way it always did. Porch light on a timer, the oak tree out front bigger now than the day I planted it, the wraparound porch I'd built board by board the summer before we got married. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes just looking at it. A house built for a family that never got the chance to be one. Inside, I did what I always do when I don't want to feel something. I worked. I went down to the shop I'd built off the garage and I sanded a table I didn't need to sand. And I told myself I'd call her tomorrow. Tomorrow, when my hands weren't shaking. Tomorrow, when I could think straight. But tomorrow became 3 days. And on the third night, I finally admitted the truth to myself. Standing there with sawdust on my forearms and her voice still living in my phone, like a ghost that wouldn't leave. I wasn't scared of what she'd say. I was scared of who I'd become the second I heard her voice live, real, present tense. Not a recording I could pause and replay and control, but an actual conversation, where I had to answer for a marriage I let slip through my fingers. I called her back that Friday. My thumb hovered over her name for what felt like an hour, standing in my kitchen with the lights off, the whole house dark, and holding its breath around me. She picked up on the third ring. Caleb. Just my name. Nothing else. But the way she said it, soft and careful, like she was testing whether I was really there or just another version of a memory she'd built in her head, that undid me a little. "Hey, Nora." My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "I got your voicemail. I figured you might not call back. I almost didn't. Honesty, right out of the gate. Some habits you can't unlearn. And apparently telling Nora Whitfield the truth was one I'd never fully lost. Took me a few days." She let out a small laugh, and it wasn't the big belly laugh I remembered. It was quieter now, worn in around the edges, like a favorite shirt washed too many times. Yeah, that sounds about right. We didn't say anything for a second. Just breathed at each other through the phone. 6 years and 100 miles of silence between us, and somehow it didn't feel awkward. It felt like standing at the edge of something. You said there was something about that last day, I said finally, because I couldn't stand it anymore. Couldn't stand the not knowing that had been eating a hole through my chest for 72 hours straight. Something you needed to tell me. She was quiet for a long moment. I heard her exhale, shaky, like she was standing at the top of a very tall ladder. Not over the phone, she said. I don't want to say this over the phone. My stomach dropped. Every terrible possibility came rushing back. Sick, dying, remarried, pregnant with someone else's child. 100 endings where I lost her twice. Nora, you're scaring me. I know. Her voice cracked just slightly. I'm sorry. I need to see your face when I say it. Can we meet? There's a diner, the one on Route 9, halfway between us. Saturday, noon? I said yes before my brain could talk me out of it. That Friday night, after I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, the barnwood table, the one from that terrible conversation 6 years ago, and I didn't sleep. I kept running through every version of what she might say, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, sitting alone in a dark kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, I let myself do something I hadn't done in 6 years. I cried. Not the quiet, dignified kind you see in movies. Real, ugly, shoulder-shaking crying. The kind that comes up from somewhere so deep it scares you. I cried for the marriage I didn't fight for. I cried for the boy at the top of the stairs who never learned that love could stay. I cried because some part of me, some stupid, hopeful part of me I thought had died years ago, was praying, actually praying, that Saturday would bring her back to me. And another part of me, the part shaped by that suitcase and that quiet drunk father, was terrified that whatever she had to tell me would be the final door closing. The truest goodbye. Maybe she was there to tell me she was engaged. Maybe the man on the other end of her new life needed her to close this chapter clean. Needed her to look her ex-husband in the eye one last time and let him go for good. Saturday came slow, and then all at once. The diner on Route 9 was one of those places that hadn't changed in 30 years. Red vinyl booths, a bell over the door, a waitress named Dot, who'd probably worked there since Nixon was president. I got there 20 minutes early, because I'm the kind of man who's always early. And I sat in a booth by the window and ordered black coffee I had no intention of drinking. And then the bell over the door rang, and I looked up, and there she was. Nora Whitfield, 6 years older. Her hair was shorter now, just past her shoulders, a few strands of gray she hadn't bothered to color, and somehow that made her more beautiful, not less, like she'd stopped performing for anyone and just let herself be exactly who she'd become. She was wearing a green coat, and I remembered, out of nowhere, that green had always been her color, that she used to say it made her feel like herself. She saw me and stopped for half a second, right there by the door, like the sight of me had knocked the wind out of her too. Then she walked over and slid into the booth across from me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. We just looked, really looked. 6 years of separate lives sitting in the space between 2 coffee cups. You got old, she said finally, and there was a smile underneath it, small and real. You got prettier, I said, and I meant it, and I watched her cheeks color the way they used to when I said something that caught her off guard. Dot came by, refilled coffee neither of us drank, and left us alone, and Nora wrapped both hands around her mug like she needed something to hold on to. I'm seeing someone, she said. No warm-up, straight into it, like ripping off a bandage. His name's Grant. He's kind, steady. He's never once made me feel like I had to earn his attention. I felt that land somewhere in my chest, sharp and clean, like a nail driven straight through wood. But I made myself nod. Good, I said, and I almost meant it. You deserve that, Nora. You deserve somebody who doesn't. I stopped. Who doesn't keep one foot out the door, she finished for me, quietly. No cruelty in it at all. Just fact, just history. Yeah, she looked down at her coffee. I didn't come here to talk about Grant, Caleb. I came here because I've been carrying something for 6 years, and it's been getting heavier every single day, and I watched him propose to me 3 weeks ago. My chest tightened, and I said I needed time, not because I don't care about him, but because I realized I couldn't say yes to anybody, couldn't build anything real with anybody, until I told you the truth about the day I left. The diner around us seemed to go very quiet. Dot's radio was playing something soft and staticky from the kitchen. Outside, a truck rumbled by on Route 9, and I sat there, hands flat on the table, bracing myself. When I told you I couldn't keep loving someone with one foot out the door, Nora said, her voice trembling now. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth, and I let you believe, for 6 years, that it was just about you, just about your fear. And Caleb, some of it was, God, some of it really was. But I did something too, something I never told you. Nora, let me finish, please. I've been rehearsing this for 6 years, and if I stop now, I'll never get it out. I nodded, throat tight, and I let her talk. 3 months before I left, she said, I found out I was pregnant. The world tilted sideways. I didn't tell you, she went on, tears sliding down now, unashamed, the way she'd always cried, big and honest, even when it broke my heart to watch. I was so scared, Caleb. I was so scared that if I told you, you'd either run completely or you'd stay for the wrong reason. Stay because of a baby instead of because of me, and I couldn't survive either one. So I sat on it. For weeks. I kept trying to find the right moment, and there never was one, because you were always somewhere else, even when you were in the room. My hands were shaking on the table. And then, she whispered, I lost her. 9 weeks in, before I ever found the courage to tell you we were going to have a daughter. I stopped breathing. I never told you any of it, Caleb. Not that I was pregnant. Not that we lost her. I grieved completely alone, in that house, while you were in the shop sanding tables at midnight, because you didn't know how to sit still with your own feelings. And somewhere in that grief, something in me just broke. I didn't leave you because you had one foot out the door. I mean, I did. But underneath it, I left because I was drowning in a loss you didn't even know existed. And I couldn't drown next to a man who didn't know I was underwater. Tears were running down my face now too, hot and fast, and I didn't wipe them away. Didn't care who saw a grown man crying in a diner booth on Route 9. I named her, Nora said, barely audible. In my head, I called her Wren. I never told anyone that either. Not my mother, not Grant, nobody but you. Right now, 6 years too late. I reached across the table before I could stop myself, and I took her hand, and she let me. Why are you telling me now? I asked, my voice breaking on every word. Nora looked up at me, eyes rimmed red, and said the thing that would change everything that came after. Because Grant asked me to marry him under an oak tree. The same kind of oak tree you built our wedding arch under. And when he got down on one knee, all I could think about, the only thing in my whole head, was you, standing there in your one good suit, telling me you'd hold on this time. And I realized I never actually gave you the chance to keep that promise. I left before you even knew there was something worth fighting that hard for. I stared at her, my whole chest cracking open like old wood finally giving way. Nora, I said, if I had known. I know, she said. That's exactly why I never told you. Because I already knew you would have stayed. And I needed to know, someday, whether you'd stay for me, not for a baby, not for guilt, not for grief, for me. And I ran out of time to find out. Because I ran. Dot walked by again, saw our faces, and quietly walked the other direction, leaving the coffee pot behind on a neighboring table, like she understood this wasn't a conversation that needed refilling. So, what happens now? I asked. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. Smaller than a man who builds houses for a living should ever sound. Nora wiped her face with the back of her hand, and for the first time since she'd walked through that door, she almost smiled. Now, she said, I need to know if the man across from me still has one foot out the door. Or if 6 years and a voicemail and a dead daughter's name were enough to finally teach him how to stay. And I opened my mouth to answer her. I swear to you, I had the words right there, ready, when my phone buzzed on the table between us. A text, from a number I hadn't seen in 6 years. Grant. And it said, "Nora, I know where you are. We need to talk. Now." Nora's phone buzzed again on the table, and this time she turned it face down without even looking at it, the way you'd smother a fire before it caught the curtains. "He's not a bad man," she said quietly, before I could say anything. "I need you to know that. Whatever happens in the next 5 minutes, Grant never did anything wrong. He just found out where I was going today. I told him I needed space to think about his proposal. I didn't tell him it was because of you." "How'd he find you?" "Find my phone." She almost laughed, but it came out broken instead. 6 years of history, Caleb, and I get caught by an app. The bell over the diner door rang. A man walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray peacoat that looked like it had never once been slept in, wrinkled. Kind eyes, even from across the room. Not the villain my chest wanted him to be, just a man who'd been left waiting for an answer for 3 weeks and had run out of patience for silence. Grant. He scanned the diner, found Nora, and his shoulders dropped an inch when he saw her. Relief, not anger. Then his eyes moved to me, sitting across from her with tear tracks still drying on my face, and something in his expression shifted from relief to understanding. The kind of understanding that hurts worse than anger ever could. He didn't storm over. He didn't make a scene. He just walked to the booth, slow, like a man walking toward a door he already knew he didn't want to open. "Nora." His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have come. 3 weeks of no answer, and then you drive 2 hours to a diner on a Saturday, and I panicked. I thought maybe something happened to you." "Something did happen," Nora said gently, and she reached up and took his hand, the same hand that had been holding mine 30 seconds earlier. And something about that simple honesty, not hiding it, not pretending, told me everything about the kind of woman she'd grown into over 6 years. "This is Caleb," she said. "My ex-husband." Grant looked at me for a long moment. I stood up, because that's what you do, because my father never stood up for anything, and I promised myself a long time ago I'd be a different kind of man, even if I hadn't always managed it. I put my hand out. "Caleb Mercer," I said. He shook it. His grip was firm, honest. "Grant Ashby." Nobody sat back down right away. We just stood there, 3 people who loved the same woman in 3 different seasons of her life, standing in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, the whole moment balanced on a knife's edge. "I think," Grant said slowly, "I need to hear whatever this is. Because I asked you to marry me, Nora, and I've been sitting with radio silence for 3 weeks, and I deserve to know what's happening, even if I don't like the answer." Nora looked at him, then at me, then back at him, and I watched her gather every ounce of courage she had left in her body. "Sit down," she said to both of us. "Please, I owe you both the truth, and I'm done being a coward about it." So we sat, me on one side, Grant beside her on the other, and Nora Whitfield, hands shaking around a coffee cup gone cold, told Grant everything she'd just told me. The pregnancy, the loss, the daughter she'd named Wren, in the privacy of her own grieving heart, the 6 years of silence, the voicemail she left in a hardware store that smelled like sawdust. Grant listened without interrupting once. I watched his face carefully, the way you watch a man you expect to hate you, and instead, I saw something I didn't expect at all. Compassion. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and squeezed her hand, and he said the kind of thing that told me exactly why Nora had let this man into her life in the first place. "Nora," he said, "I've known for a year that some part of your heart never fully closed a door. I felt it every time you got quiet around Father's Day, every time you flinched at baby showers. I proposed anyway because I love you, and I hoped that love would be enough to finish healing whatever this was." He paused, and his voice cracked just slightly. "But I can't be the reason you never find out. I won't spend the next 40 years married to a woman who's still wondering what would have happened if she'd stayed in that diner 5 minutes longer. Grant, let me finish." He smiled, sad but steady, the smile of a genuinely good man doing a genuinely hard thing. "I want you to be happy, Nora. Fully, not halfway. And I don't think that's going to be with me. I think I already knew that, if I'm honest. I think that's part of why I proposed. Some part of me was hoping you'd say no, so I wouldn't have to be the one to say it." Tears were running down her face now, and mine too, and even Grant's eyes were shining, and it was the strangest, most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. 3 people, in a diner booth, choosing honesty over the easy lie. Grant stood up. He looked at me one more time. "Take care of her," he said. "Whatever that ends up meaning, she deserves somebody who fights for her out loud." And then the bell over the door rang one more time, and he was gone, out into the gray Saturday afternoon. And Nora and I sat alone at that table, with 2 cold coffees, and a truth finally spoken out loud, after 6 long years of silence. For a long time, neither of us said anything. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "For Grant. For any of this. I never wanted—" "Caleb." She wiped her eyes, and there was something different in her face now. Lighter, like she'd set down a suitcase she'd been carrying since the day she packed her own. "Don't apologize for the truth. I've spent 6 years apologizing for things I didn't even do wrong. I'm done with that." I nodded, and I reached across the table, and this time I didn't hesitate. I took both her hands in both of mine. "Careful, the way you'd hold something you once broke, and swore you'd never break again. I need to tell you something too," I said, "and I need you to actually hear it. Not just the words, but what's underneath them." She waited. "When I was 9, I watched my mother pack a suitcase, and my father just stood there and let her go. And I told myself that day that love doesn't last, so don't hold on too tight. I carried that into every single thing I ever built, including us. I kept one foot out the door our whole marriage, not because I didn't love you, Nora, but because loving you all the way felt like handing you a hammer and pointing at exactly where it would hurt the most when you finally left." "Caleb, let me finish," I said, echoing her own words back to her, and she smiled through her tears. "For 6 years, I've listened to one 19-second voicemail 32 times. Not because of what you said, because of what I heard underneath it. A woman brave enough to finally say the truth out loud, even when it terrified her. And somewhere around the 10th time I played it, I realized something." "What?" "I realized I'd rather spend the rest of my life terrified and standing all the way in the room with you, than safe and comfortable and halfway out the door in a house that's felt empty for 6 years. I don't want to be my father anymore, Nora. I want to be the man who stays, even when it's hard, even when there's no guarantee, especially then." She was crying freely now, and so was I, and neither one of us cared who saw 2 grown adults falling apart and back together at a diner booth on a random gray Saturday. "I'm not asking you to marry me today," I said. "I know that's not fair, and I know we have 6 years of healing to do first, and I know Ren deserves to be grieved properly, together, the way we should have grieved her the first time. But I'm asking you if there's any room left in your heart for a man who's finally learned how to hold on." Nora looked at me for a long, long moment. The same look she'd given me under that oak tree on our wedding day, except older now, wiser, forged by 6 years of fire neither of us asked for. "There's a bench," she said finally, "outside my mother's house, under the oak tree, the one you built our arch under. I still go sit there on Ren's birthday every year. I've never told anyone that either." "When is it?" I asked. 3 weeks from Tuesday." "I'll be there," I said. "If you want me there." "I want you there," she whispered. We sat in that diner for 2 more hours, past the lunch rush, past Dot's shift change, talking about everything and nothing. 6 years of separate lives slowly, carefully, weaving back together, one honest sentence at a time. Not rushing towards some fairy tale ending. Just 2 people who'd finally learned how to tell each other the truth, choosing, very deliberately, to try again. 3 weeks later, I stood under that oak tree on a cold October morning, and Nora was already there, sitting on the bench with 2 cups of coffee, one of them black, just the way I liked it. She'd remembered. 6 years, and she'd still remembered. We didn't say much. We just sat together under that tree, in the quiet, and for the first time in 6 years, the silence between us didn't feel like a wound. It felt like healing. We said Ren's name out loud together for the first time. Out loud, in daylight, no longer a secret grief carried alone in the dark. And somewhere in that quiet, ordinary moment, under an oak tree neither of us had planted, but both of us had grown beneath, I finally understood what my father never learned, and what took me 41 years and one broken marriage to figure out. Love was never about guarantees. It was never about certainty, or safety, or knowing for sure that no one would ever leave. Love was a choice you made every single morning, over and over, with both feet firmly in the room, no matter how much it terrified you. I didn't get my marriage back that day. That took another year of slow, patient, honest work. Therapy, hard conversations, learning how to grieve a daughter neither of us had properly mourned, learning how to trust again, one small promise at a time. But I got something better than instant repair. I got real. I got earned. And 2 years after that Tuesday in the hardware store, under that same oak tree, in front of both our families, Nora Whitfield became my wife again. This time with both my feet planted firmly on the ground, no part of me held back, no suitcase waiting by the door. I still have that voicemail, 19 seconds. I've listened to it more than 32 times now. I stopped counting somewhere after the wedding, and I never plan on deleting it, not because I need it anymore to hold on to her, but because it's the sound of the bravest thing either one of us ever did. It's the sound of two broken people choosing, finally, to stop running. If you made it this far with me, I want to ask you something before you go. How many people in your own life are you loving with one foot out the door, holding back, staying guarded, waiting for the moment they leave, so it won't hurt as much when they do? And what would it cost you, really cost you, to finally step all the way into the room? If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me to live it, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to find you. Stories about love, about second chances, about the quiet, ordinary courage it takes to finally stay.